Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well today. Thank you so much for joining us for our webinar on findings from the Pay and Retention Survey, which we ran earlier this year. It's really great to have so many of you on the call with us today. So my name is Lucy and I've been working at Charity Job for 2 years now, and I work with Ginger and the team at Charity Job to conduct research to understand our recruiter and candidate users better. And we use the insight which we gather from candidates to create reports, blogs and webinars that inform recruiters about trends and best practices for fairer and effective recruitment.
And hello everyone, my name is Jinsha and I'm Research Executive at Charity Job. I've been at Charity Job for a year now and I play a key role helping us understand our customers and monitoring market trends. Claire, who is Marketing Director, is also on the call with us and she'll be taking in questions at the end. So we're now just going to switch off our cameras now for the remainder of the webinar and we'll jump right in. So now we're just going to go through a few bits of housekeeping before we kick off with the main part of the webinar. So firstly, you should be able to see our slides at the moment, and the slides should move through the webinar with us. If the slides go out of sync at any point, a Sync to Presenter button will appear in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen where you can use arrows to flick through the slides. So you can press that button to sync the slides with us. As we mentioned, there will be some time for Q&A at the end of this webinar, so please use the Q&A function on Teams to leave your questions. If you're joining on the Teams app, this should be on the banner at the top of your screen, and if you're joining on your phone, it should be on the bottom right-hand corner. Claire will be keeping an eye out for questions and will try to answer as many of these as possible in the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So don't worry if you don't get an immediate response to your question, and if we don't get around to answering your question, we will follow up with you directly after the webinar. And just to note, the webinar is being recorded, so please only share your questions if you're happy for them to be on the recording. And finally, we will be sharing a recording of this webinar and the webinar slides, as well as a copy of the Pay and Retention Report to all those who registered later today. So here's a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. So we'll start off by talking about the methodology and who responded to our survey, before moving on to look at employment and salary trends amongst respondents, along with satisfaction with pay. And then we will talk about retention and why some respondents may want to move jobs. And finally, we will wrap up with some standout insights from the report. We should have around 10 minutes at the end for the Q&A and discussion, and we aim to wrap up at around about 30 minutes or so.
So firstly, I'm going to briefly talk about the background to this research and report. So many of you will know that we produce a charity job salary report each year, which looks at the average salaries in the sector for different charity job categories, experience levels, and so on. So we have a huge amount of data on salaries in the sector and what candidates are looking and applying for. But we wanted to understand more about what happens to candidates' pay in the sector after some time and what factors influence retention in the sector or wanting to look for a new job. So in January this year, we created this survey and we shared it on email to all charity job candidates who'd been active on our website at some point within the last 3 years. And we analysed the findings from more than 1,800 respondents who are based in the UK and are currently working in the charity sector. So first off, we're going to talk a little bit about the profile of those who responded. And specifically in terms of demographics, we asked about their age, gender identity and ethnicity. But please bear in mind that this isn't reflective of the whole candidate pool. It's just those who are based in the UK, working in the charity sector and who responded to our survey. So the age profile of respondents was quite mixed. 94% were between the ages of 25 and 64, and the largest proportion of respondents were aged between 35 and 49, and then between 25 and 34. 77% of respondents identified as female, 20% as male, and 2% had another gender identity. And finally, in terms of ethnicity, the majority, so 68% of those who responded to our survey, were white British. And now I'm going to hand back to Ginger.
So now we're going to talk about employment and salary trends amongst respondents. So most of our respondents were either in experienced non-manager levels or above, with the experienced non-manager level having the most representation with 39%, which was then followed by management level with 33%. Looking at average annual salary range, 80% of respondents earned between £20,000 and £50,000, and 12% of respondents earned £51,000 or higher. The salary band of 20,000 to 30,000 had the highest sample with 34%. We also found that there was a gender pay gap amongst respondents. We saw that 23% of male respondents earned £51,000 or more. However, for female respondents, this was only 9%. Moreover, a higher proportion of male respondents held director or CEO level roles with 14% compared to female respondents with only 4%.
So, have charity sector candidates received a pay increase in the past year? So, we asked respondents who told us that they had been in their job for longer than a year if they'd received one. And we found that almost 3/4 of respondents had. So, over half received an increase due to an annual salary review, and an additional 21% received an increase due to a promotion or increase in responsibilities, and that was either on its own or in combination with an annual salary review. We also found that beyond salary increases, almost 1 in 4 received other financial support from their employers in the past year, and that was most commonly a cost of living payment. Candidates who told us that they received a salary increase were then asked to select the closest percentage range of their increase from a number of options. So this graph shows the proportion of respondents who received pay increases of different percentage brackets. And the data here is focused on what increase respondents got for their annual salary review. So on the left-hand side of the graph, we have a pay increase of 0.5 to 2%, which 25% of respondents got. And on the far right, we have pay increases of 14.5% or more, which only 1% of respondents got for their annual pay increase. So the vast majority received annual increases between 0.5 and 6%. Interestingly, when we looked at the annual salary percentage increase by respondents' current salary range, we saw that those earning between £20,000 and £30,000 were more likely to receive a smaller annual percentage increase, so one of 2% or less, compared to those in higher salary brackets. And in terms of pay increases for promotions or increased responsibilities, these varied considerably. So we've not reported on it in much detail because of the small sample, but we did find that nearly half received increases of more than 8.5%, and some actually received increases of more than 20%.
Thank you, Lucy. So now moving on to satisfaction with pay. So despite the majority of respondents receiving a pay increase in the last year, satisfaction with pay was poor. So we asked candidates how much they agreed or disagreed with 4 statements, and the 4 statements were as followed. So I believe that my pay is fair. I believe that my pay reflects my job performance. I believe that my pay is aligned with the market rate for my job role in the charity sector. And finally, I believe that my pay reflects the current cost of living. A staggering 69% didn't agree that their pay reflects the current cost of living, so with 30% strongly disagreeing and 39% disagreeing. And nearly 60% didn't agree that their pay reflects their job performance. Furthermore, almost half of respondents didn't agree that their pay was fair, and 40% didn't believe that their pay was aligned with the market rate for their job role within the charity sector. We also looked at satisfaction with pay by salary breakdown. We found that only 22% of those earning between £20,000 to £30,000 believed that their pay was fair, compared to those earning between £51,000 to £60,000. who were 3 times more likely to agree with the same statement. And an overwhelming 83% of those earning between £20,000 to £30,000 don't feel their pay reflects the current cost of living. And this is compared to an average of 69% across all salary bands.
Thank you, Jinsha. So next, we're going to look at some of the factors influencing job decisions. So whether candidates want to look for a new job or stay put where they are. So we asked all respondents how likely they are to change jobs within the next year. And almost 60% said they were likely or very likely to change jobs. And only 15% said they were very unlikely to move jobs and happy to stay in their current role for at least the next year. So you might be thinking, if Charity Jobs shared a survey, surely it goes to those who are looking for a new job. And that's a valid point. So the findings here are based on responses from candidates who work in the UK charity sector and who've been active on the Charity Job website at some point in the last 3 years. We hope these results are representative of the sector's population, but it is important to acknowledge a potential response bias with individuals actively looking for a new role on Charity Job who may have been more likely to respond. We went on to look at the likelihood to change jobs in the next year against other variables in our data, and we noticed a few areas where there were differences between groups. So firstly, we saw that those in more junior stages of their career and those earning lower salaries were more likely to be looking to change jobs compared to those who were in more experienced roles or earning higher salaries. We also found that dissatisfaction with pay was a significant factor influencing the likelihood of changing jobs. So around half of those who disagreed with any of the statements Jinsha read out previously said that they were very likely to change jobs in the next year. And on the other hand, those who received salary increases through promotions or increased responsibilities in addition to an annual review were significantly less likely to plan on leaving, and they were the most likely group in our dataset to say that they were very unlikely to move. So where do candidates want to work in the future? We asked those who said they were likely or very likely to change jobs where they're looking or considering looking. And only 2% said that they are looking at roles solely in their current charity. 17% are looking for roles in other sectors only, so the private or public sector. And most respondents were open to various options, with around a quarter of respondents considering other charities, 22% looking at other charities and other sectors, 9% looking at their current charity and another charity or sector, and a quarter were open to all possibilities.
Thank you, Lucy. So, respondents who were planning to move jobs were also asked reasons as to why they're looking or were considering looking for a new job from a list of options. So, the most commonly selected reason was to advance my salary with 78%, and secondly, to advance my career opportunities with 65%. And this was then followed by to advance my skill set with 40%. Aside from salary progression and development, other reasons as to why respondents were looking for a new job included to improve my work-life balance, poor work culture, and to work for a cause I'm passionate about. We also asked respondents to rank these reasons they chose in order of priority. We saw that nearly half of respondents who selected to advance my salary ranked it as their top priority, and a further 26% ranked it as their second most important priority. However, those who selected poor work culture or other as reasons were likely to prioritize these over others. So this might suggest that for these respondents, workplace issues weigh heavily in their decision on wanting to move jobs. And you can see the full list of reasons in the full report.
So we're now coming towards the end of this webinar, so we wanted to highlight some key insights from the Charity Job Pay and Retention Report. So in our research, we discovered that pay increases were common, with almost 3/4 of respondents receiving a pay increase in the past year. However, these increases were fairly limited, with most respondents getting a smaller percentage increase, and that was especially true for those who were earning lower salaries. Many of these limited pay increases fall behind the rate of inflation and likely contribute to widespread salary dissatisfaction. We also discovered how critical pay satisfaction is with regards to retention and the desire to change jobs. So, a significant proportion of respondents were dissatisfied with their current pay, believing it to be unfair, misaligned with market rates, job performance, and the cost of living. And this dissatisfaction correlated with a high likelihood of seeking new employment. We also saw that wanting to get a higher salary was the most common reason for looking for a new role. And on the other hand, we saw that those who received pay increases because of promotions or increased responsibilities, in addition to an annual review, were significantly less likely to plan on leaving. So these findings highlight the importance of addressing pay concerns where possible. And finally, to conclude, we wanted to leave you with some recommendations to help you with retention in your charity. So, firstly, the research really points to how important it is to have pay progression processes in your charities. And these should be regular salary reviews which follow a transparent and consistent process. And this is really important for making sure staff are motivated to stay at your charity. And to help you do this, there are loads of great resources online. So the NCDO, for example, they offer some excellent guidance on how you can create a salary structure through using things like job classification systems, conducting job evaluations, writing pay policies, and also working out what salary progression might look like. ACAS also have a guide on how organizations can use analytical job evaluations, which is sort of a way of breaking jobs down into a number of factors to establish a pay system. And also the CIPD have guidance on performance related pay if this is an avenue which you think might suit your charity better. And we will share links to these resources after the webinar, but most importantly, you should make sure that your process is consistent and transparent.
On a similar note, when reviewing employees' salaries, you should make sure they are based on experience, performance, and market rates. You can use the Charity Jobs Salary Report and Salary Checker tool to help you get data on these. The Charity Job Salary Checker tool is free to use when you create a recruiter account, and you can search for a role by its job title. It will then compute an average salary for the role and a spread of salaries based on roles posted with the same title in the last 12 months. The tool also allows you to filter salaries by organisation size and location. The Charity Jobs Salary Report is a great resource which uses data from all jobs posted on our site in the previous year. The report provides a breakdown of salaries by job category, experience level, and whether the location is in or outside of London. Furthermore, we'd also recommend that as a minimum, you benchmark junior salaries against those set by the Living Wage Foundation. These salaries reflect the actual cost of living to ensure employees can live happy and healthy lives. We will share all resources with you again after the webinar.
So the findings also shone a light on the importance of career development in retaining staff. So aside from salary, career development was a key motivator for candidates to look for other jobs. So providing opportunities for training, skill development, and career progression within your charity helps keep employees engaged and it demonstrates a commitment to their growth. We do understand that this can be challenging for some small charities with tight budgets. However, there are lots of affordable training and development options. So, looking in house, you should consider things like mentoring, shadowing, knowledge sharing, and encouraging employees with set skills to do teach-ins. Online training platforms can also be a cost-effective solution, as well as training offered by charitable organisations such as the CIOF and NCVO. Giving autonomy to employees with regards to the training and development they need. So, for example, asking them to think about the skills they want to develop and how it will benefit the charity can also be a helpful way to help you prioritize training needs across teams. And we will share a blog post which we've done on this with a bit more guidance in the resources.
And finally, time and time again, we are seeing how important a workplace culture is to candidates. Charities should try and foster a workplace where employees feel supported and heard and address any issues related to workload, stress, or negative dynamics. Developing a positive culture is not something that happens overnight. It starts at the top and requires buy-in from leadership. Often the first step is to assess where the current culture is at, and then to establish where you want it to go. A positive culture often has some of the same hallmarks, including open communication, celebrating and rewarding successes, and acting with empathy and compassion. We will share some blogs which offer more advice after the webinar.
So thank you all so much for listening. And now we're just going to hand over to Claire for the Q&A. So yeah, feel free to add your question into the Q&A if you haven't already. But just a reminder that if we don't get around to answering it, now we will share a response afterwards.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Ginger. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. We've got just over 5 minutes for questions, so I will run through as many as quickly as possible. Someone has asked whether our gender pay gap or any of our data, is that based on median or average? So I believe that's all based on average. That's for all of our data. And then we had a question, I'll try and go as much in order as possible. Why are the percentage increases lower for those on lower salaries?
Thank you. That's a interesting question. So yeah, as you said, our data did show that the percentage increases were lower for those earning lower salaries, so those below £30,000. It's really hard to give a definite answer to your question as we don't know the rationale behind those decisions. And actually, before we did this research, we expected the opposite. So we kind of expected lower earners to be receiving larger percentage increases, since that translates to less money in absolute terms. I guess there are a few possibilities here. So one could be that higher paid staff, I guess they often have more experience and more familiar with their roles. They might have more complex responsibilities. So charities might be prioritizing trying to retain those staff by offering, larger pay increases. Another possibility could be that more lower paid positions may have been more likely to exist in charities who are, feeling the pinch with tighter budgets, and therefore they might not be able to afford significant pay increases. But yeah, it is quite hard to say. And if anyone else does have any insight into that, please do feel free to share in the chat.
Thank you. And actually linked to that, someone's asked, can you tell us how many people in more junior level roles got a low pay increase compared to other groups?
Yes, I can try and answer this one. So those earning between 20,000 to £30,000 were more likely to receive a percentage increase of 2% or less than those in higher salary brackets. So I'm just having a look at the data now. So we can see that 32% of those earning between £20,000 to £30,000 received a pay increase of 2% or under. And this is compared to 22% of those earning between £31,000 to £40,000, and 21% of those earning between £41,000 to £50,000. And then looking at the average across all respondents, this was 25%.
Thank you, Ginger. Another question has been, from the results, would we say that pay is the main factor that decides whether an employee stays at a charity?
Thank you. I can take this one. So yeah, I really think this answer varies significantly from person to person, as I guess every employee will have their own priorities and individual needs. And I think likely a combination of factors will influence their decision at the end of the day. However, I think this research definitely says that pay can play a really huge factor in whether employees do want to stay in their role or not. So yeah, in the survey, it was nearly 80% of those who said they were looking for or considering looking for a new role who selected the to advance my salary as a reason, and that was the most commonly selected reason. However, on that, we did also ask people to prioritize selections, and we actually saw that those who selected poor work culture and other as reasons, so that they were then more likely to say that they were the main factor for looking for a new job. So I think that also tells us that those who unfortunately work somewhere with a poor work culture are really likely to want to leave regardless of other factors. But for others, I think salary is likely to be the main driving force. And kind of related on that, actually, on the point of organisation and culture both being really important. In last year, we ran a benefits survey, and that showed us that respondents saw both salary and organisation culture of like pretty much equal, very high importance when looking for a new job. So yeah, I definitely think having a positive culture is really important for retention, and it means that, you know, your employees do feel supported and valued in your organisation. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Lucy. Is there a reason why more junior level employees are looking for new jobs?
Okay, so this is a great question, but it's hard to say for sure. So at the moment, we don't have any data showing the reasons as to why junior level employees are more likely to look for new jobs. However, it could be a possibility that those in junior levels may be more likely to look for new roles if they want a higher salary or possibly to get more experienced in varied roles.
Great, thank you. And I think this is going to have to be the last question. And as Lucy's mentioned, for anyone we haven't got round to answering, we will be in touch if we can answer that question. So the final question was, what options do charities have if they can't impact pay?
I could take this one. Yeah, this is a really good question. Thank you for sharing it. And we do understand, obviously, that increasing pay can be really hard for some charities. But the good news is that there are definitely some other things that you can consider doing to help you with retention. So as we spoke about, training and development is definitely a way to help your employees feel valued and motivated to stay. And advancing skills was actually something we saw which was quite likely to drive people out of their jobs. So yeah, we did mention a couple of ways that you could do this in your charity with a small budget, and that includes things like finding opportunities for mentoring, perhaps job shadowing. You could encourage sort of knowledge sharing. Online training can also be a good option. And also, you should look for training offered by charitable organisations, which can be a little bit more affordable. But I think aside from that, you can also show your value for your employees in other ways, which don't necessarily have to come at a high cost. So for example, publicly celebrating and sharing successes in your team is one way you could do that. You could consider offering small rewards, such as like vouchers, to those who do perform very well. And even just remembering to say thank you to your employees and tell them, you know, that you really do value their hard work, I think can go quite a long way. And then one other thing that just came to mind is that if you can sort of wiggle on your benefits and the flexibility that you offer, this can be a really great way to help with retention. So remote working options, for example, we know lots of candidates are looking for that. Also offering kind of more flexible hours or flexibility in other ways. And you could also consider other things like increasing, you know, your annual leave entitlement with years of service, or just looking to, yeah, expand your benefits packet in other ways. I hope that answers the question. Great. I think that is everything then, as I can see we're coming to the end of time. So yeah, we'll wrap up there. But I just want to say thank you all so much for attending today. Just another little reminder that we will be sharing a copy of the slides, a webinar recording, and the full pay and retention report later today, as well as links to those resources which we mentioned. But please just note that you will most probably get an automated recording shared after this webinar, but we will also be sharing it again later in addition to those resources which I just mentioned. And over the next few months, we will be hosting more webinars, so please keep your eyes peeled for more information on those. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone, and we hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day.